uncovered fraud that largely benefited parts of the state's community. They say 59 people have been convicted in those schemes, and more than $1 billion has been stolen from taxpayers, despite only a small pocket of the tens of thousands of people in the Somali immigrant community there being responsible. President Trump, he's attacking all of them.
Somalians ripped off that state for billions of dollars, billions, every year, billions of dollars, and they contribute nothing. I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I could say that about other countries, too.
And now a federal official tells CNN that ICE will launch an operation targeting Somali immigrants in Minneapolis and in St. Paul in the coming days. Camille Foster is back with us. This is not surprising because it is often the case that when something happens, Trump targets the entire community. But in this case, 59 individuals brought to justice or will be brought to justice over this alleged fraud. But now everybody from Somalia should be kicked out of the country?
Yeah. Look, the categorical denunciations are bad. It is also the case, and this isn't qualifying it in a way that may abdicates Trump's responsibility for having said it, although he isn't the most sophisticated communicator. Charismatic, sophisticated, not so much. This is how we talk about race and ethnicity in this country. We do a lot of categorical denunciations. For a very long time, it was all about kind of Black lives and whiteness and what whiteness does. No one should be shocked that this is how we're talking about Somalians in this context as well. And I think in general, if we were to move away from that kind of categorical nonsense, it'd be a little bit easier to take on board the condemnations of the president in this context, as opposed to having to just kind of do it when it's convenient for us. So that's the first thing I'd say. But again, I do think that responsibility for this sits with the president. He ought to be a hell of a lot more careful. It is completely inappropriate to condemn an entire community for the failings of a particular community, but the failings of particular people in the community, but the failings of those people are real. And the actual scandal here is genuinely egregious. And there are lots of political actors who ought to be condemned. And I do think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't try to interpret this in a way that allows us to both condemn the categorical statements here that are, again, irresponsible and wrong, but also acknowledge there is actually a real controversy here. There's something that ought to be addressed.
I think that everyone acknowledges that this is a real, not only a real controversy, it's a real criminal case, and these people are being tried. However, Trump is basically saying, he literally has said they don't contribute anything. They should go back. We don't want them here.
I think what he said was that people who are complaining, et cetera, and who come from these bad countries, that they are bad and we don't want them here. Again, I think that's how most people who support the president are going to interpret this in a generous way.
But this is really the latest panicked scapegoating because Trump is in real trouble in a lot of areas. He fell asleep 4 times during this meeting, by the way, which is raising even more questions about the energy level.
Having your ass kissed for hours could be a little boring.
Yeah, apparently we've got the war crime situation. Voters increasingly know. He said he was going to bring prices down. Prices
in fairness, though, this is the deflection that I'm talking about. There is a legitimate issue here.
And the failure
of Minnesota officials who actually permitted this kind of nonsense to take place.
Wait a minute.
That is precisely why people are talking about it.
The governor of Minnesota, who didn't answer any of the whistleblowers or the warning signs on this scandal, who swept it under the rug, nearly became the vice president of the United States.
Precisely.
And everyone in the American news media ignored this. The New York Times is just now reporting on a scandal that's been years in the making. Why? Why didn't they do a deep dive on Tim Walz and the campaign for this?
Hold on.
How is this possible?
Wasn't it Merrick Garland of the Biden administration that brought many of these charges in the first place?
Yes, and Tim Walz.
So are you really suggesting that Democrats ignored it, even though a Democratic...
Tim Walz is an incompetent governor, and yes, he ignored it.
Attorney General of a Democratic administration
It's a state
prosecuted the case.
It's fraud within a state program in Tim Walz's administration.
Here's the question that I have. Trump has now put a target on the back of Somali Americans all over the country. I understand, Camille, what you were saying about the significance of these fraud charges. What I am asking is it legitimate in the United States of America in 2025 for anybody who is from a particular nationality, whether you are Somali or Afghan, to be painted with the brush of any other person who happens to be from a similar ethnic or a country of origin, to be painted with that same brush? Is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing?
Group slurs are wrong. Let's get that
That's
out.
what we do,
This is
actually.
what he does, but
It's either wrong or it's either right or it's wrong.
It's of course it's wrong, and it's
It's
very
not just
reminiscent
what-
of what
wait,
we
this
did
is-
with the Haitians, right? They eat cats, they
Yes,
eat
they're
No,
dogs.
wait. This
It's
is
very reminiscent of him calling Haiti a shithole. It's very reminiscent, particularly if it's a poor country, particularly if the people in that country are brown or black. Yeah, he
Wait a
has
minute.
no.
This is a
I
culture-wide thing.
I
This is a
want-
culture-wide thing. I mean, these phrases are thrown around all the time, and group slurs are a bad idea. But we get toxic masculinity. The
This is correct.
patriarchy's wrong. Like we are all shorthanding.
I mean,
a
is
lot
the
of slurs.
patriarchy wrong or not?
I
Is it? I don't know. I mean, but look, I don't think those are the same. I don't think those are the same thing. There are 59 people who have committed fraud. There has been a lot of fraud in these pandemic era programs. 3,500 defendants charged, billions of dollars. Donald Trump, literally in the last week, has pardoned or he commuted the sentence of a American fraudster. $1.7 billion worth of fraud. So people who are white are defrauding folks. People who are black are defrauding folks. Americans, Somali Americans. Why is it that suddenly all Somali Americans don't deserve to be here because of individuals who committed crimes? Why not this guy who Trump
How
just
does
let
the
off
story
scot-free?
about billions in fraud
Saying that
become the
we
story about
all
Donald Trump?
agree that the fraud story in Minnesota is bad, and yet the topic we're discussing is not the fraud
Hey.
scandal, it's Donald Trump talking
Or
about
the
it.
governor who
This
swept it
is
under
why
the
he
rug.
won in 2016, and it's why
okay.
he won in
But hold on.
2024, because
I
instead
think
of
that you would
talking
have a
about
stronger
the
argument
outrageous
if-
situation in
I
which
think you would have a
immigrants who were
stronger
given
argument.
the greatest privilege on earth, American citizenship, turned around and stole from the American people.
Listen.
We're talking about how Donald Trump talks about
People of all backgrounds.
That is his
Hold on,
superpower.
Batia. People of all backgrounds steal and defraud, okay? It would be a better argument if we were talking about a case that was not being prosecuted, about justice that was not being served. But it is happening in this case, and it is wrong that this happened in the first place. But the question, I think it is a fair question for innocent people, regardless of whether you are from a country that Donald Trump doesn't like or a religion that maybe he doesn't like, do you have the right to exist even when somebody who has the same characteristics as you does something bad? Is that okay?
Policing of the
say-
American
he didn't
people
say no one
by
had a right to
immigrants,
exist. Yeah.
it's just utterly unacceptable. And it is
let
a
me-
unique
let me make this
rule
point.
when people have
Hold on.
been granted
You just said
Let
the
me make
mass
this point.
policing of the American people by immigrants.
Yes.
There is mass
In Minnesota.
policing of the American people that is happening by Americans
Most-
every single day.
I think
Most of the fleecing
This
Yeah,
is
but
happening by
people
Americans.
took
Let me tell you
advantage of our
what it is.
generosity, and that is
Okay.
uniquely.
Okay, let me get a word in edgeways. Let me tell you where there is massive fleecing going on by some immigrants. In Miami, in South Florida, by Cuban-born immigrants who have defrauded Medicare. 75% of the arrests and convictions in South Florida for Medicare fraud, to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, is by Cuban-born immigrants. 40% of the arrests and convictions on Medicare fraud across the country is from Cuban-born immigrants. But that is a community that by and large supports Donald Trump and that Donald Trump likes so much. So he wouldn't think, it wouldn't occur to him to say, Cubans are garbage and I don't want them here.
I'm just not sure that that kind of speculative conversation is as valuable as having a particular conversation
nothing
about.
speculative about what I just
if I could
said.
say,
This is
well, you're
facts.
speculating about what he would do with respect to Cubans. That is
Have
explicitly
you ever
speculation.
heard him talk
objectively.
about
That he's
Cubans?
doing it.
This
He's
is
not
again,
talking about
we're
that.
getting derailed. That is still speculation, whether or not he would in general. This specific circumstance, however, does merit some attention. The Times wrote a great, exhaustive piece. One dimension of it that we haven't talked about here is the fact that racial justice and unique concern about people being condemned for discrimination is one of the reasons why this fraud wasn't identified, pointed out, and better policed. That is a really interesting, and I think for people on the left who helped agitate
Sure.
for a lot
But
of
what
those
about-
issues, that actually helped
But Camille,
create this
we gotta go.
particular
But what
problem.
about the fraud that's perpetrated by just white people? Are
I
we
think
just
all
afraid
fraud
to condemn
is
white
generally
people because
bad, and we should not
we're
be
afraid of
condemning
that
people
too?
on
I
the
mean,
basis
look,
of their
there's
ethnicity or
fraud
race.
that
That
is
is wrong.
happening, and a lot of this COVID fraud was not identified and dealt with. So
Yes.
this is not a unique situation
Yeah.
to Minnesota. Everyone, thank you very much for being here. We'll be back in just a minute.